Thanks for having me back on the show. Um, the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa is definitely a voice for liberation. And the efforts that I've been involved in recently with regards to the African diaspora sixth region is also a liberation effort. So we're quite happy to be here on your network. So I just returned from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where the 38th ordinary session of the Assembly of Heads of State of the African Union were meeting. The mainstream media took a great interest and made one of the story angles the election of the new chairperson of the AU Commission, as you just mentioned, right? So that was the big story in the mainstream media. Next to that, however, the real big story was the launch of the African Union's theme of the year 2025, which is justice for African people and people of African descent through reparations. So the African Union this year is going to focus on that theme and devote a lot of resources and talking and ink towards the issue of reparations. And so this was the reason why a lot of the African diaspora in particular became important, because for, I could say decades, I could say more than 100 years, reparations has been issue championed by the African diaspora, not so much Africans on the continent. They kind of came into the reparations movement in 1993, a good while, 1993 was, some time ago, but it was well after we had several organized reparations movements, conferences, etc. And so the thing that we ought to know is this is an opportunity for the global reparatory justice movement of African people. The organ within the African Union that is supposed to be taking the lead on this is the African Union's Economic, Social, and Cultural Council. That is an advisory organ to the African Union and the heads of state. And it is the first organ in which official space, official representation from diaspora has been mandated. ECOSOC, Social and Cultural Council, I usually refer to it as ECOSOC. Statutes, Articles 5, Section 3, instructs African diaspora civil society to organize modalities for an election and elect 20 representatives to sit on the General Assembly. The Eco Assembly consists of 150, and 20 of them are reserved to the diaspora. Now we can kind of get into what did I go, there's a lot to talk. And some of it was because that ECOSOC statute that empowers the African diaspora, what is also referred to within the African Union as the sixth region, represents 250 to 300 million of us living outside the African continent. For 20 years, we have been instructed to elect these representatives, and we have been unable to do it. Okay? Attempts have been made. In fact, I was involved in the very first elections process back in 2005, 2006. But for one reason or another, some of those reasons having to do with dysfunction on the African diaspora side, and some of it having to do with the dysfunction on the African Union side, we have never been able to fulfill that. And so the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council just started its 4th General Assembly. Okay. This is going to be a 4-year period. And the elections for that 4th General Assembly had been announced by ECOSOC in the fall of 2024. Strangely, or unfortunately, those elections were only reserved for the 5 regions in Africa: North, South, East, West, and Central Africa civil society. The 6th region was totally excluded. And so when some of us learned of this, we felt disrespected, insulted, that we were not being included, even after 20 years of invitations, professions, to say that we are to be part of the African Union. So some of us, after going to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and raising the issue of the establishment of the 6th region there in October of 2024, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights says, no, go forward, hold your elections, right? And then bring your 20 representatives to a round table that we will co-host with ECOSOC so that the diaspora can be part of the reparations discussions throughout the year and can present their reparations claims in May of this year. So we launched that effort, that elections campaign. And when we first launched it, it was bringing all of us into unity. Groups that hadn't been working with each other, that had been fighting, were signing letters, official letters of endorsement. They were serving as regional coordinators. The 6th region has 9 sub-regions. United States is a region. Canada is a region. Central America is a region. South America is a region. Brazil, even though it's in South America, is its own region because it has 100 million Afro-descendants. Then you have Europe is a region. You have the Caribbean region. You have Asia, Oceania, and you have Middle East. Those were the 9 regions. And coordinators were appointed to host town hall meetings, disseminate information. We set up regional WhatsApp groups, and we had town hall meetings in the 9 regions. And within a matter of 2 weeks, we had, hundreds of people. We were well on our way to thousands of people. We had official endorsements from State of the African Diaspora, from African Diaspora Union, AFRIDU, from the Ethiopian World Federation, from the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA, from the Pan-African Council, from the Global African Congress UK. And we had coordinators that were from all of these organizations. And so finally it looked like we were going to be able to come together and show that we could overcome our petty differences, our historic beefs with each other, and focus on the task at hand. And at that moment, I, as the coordinator of the campaign, sent a letter to the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council explaining to them that we had felt compelled to move forward with this process because they had excluded us from the announced election process, and that we saw ourselves as working as parallel to the elections process that they had announced, and that we were preparing our representatives so that when the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council had a legal framework for our engagement, this is what was preventing them from including us. They said, well, we don't have an improved legal framework for your engagement. This has to be approved by the AU General Assembly. And this may be a lot of information to people that are new to it, but we need to discuss it. You need to learn about this. So the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council had submitted a draft legal framework engagement document to this 38th session of the Assembly of Heads of State for approval. So our position was, well, while you're working on your side, let us fulfill our side of it, elect our representatives. So if it gets approved at this General Assembly, we would have people ready to go to be seated in ECOSOC at the beginning of this year of reparations, so that we could have a full, complete, legitimate Economic, Social, and Cultural Council with diaspora representatives officially in it, to have those reparation conversations. So when we sent the letter explaining all of this, we thought the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council would give us a pat on the back and congratulate us and say, hey, this is great. You're doing our job for us. We know we gave you this instruction 19, 20 years ago. So, as long as your representatives meet the eligibility requirements of the legal framework when it's approved, we're all good. We thought that they would be encouraged. Instead, we got a cease and desist letter. And the reason for that is because the campaign was informing people that these are elections for the African Union Economic, Social, and Cultural Council. So we were asked to cease and desist from branding the campaign that way, so that people didn't think that this was actually authorized by the African Union Economic, Social, and Cultural Council. So we said, all right, well, we are following the AU ECOSOC statute, Article 5, Section 3, right? We are electing representatives that we want seated in the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council, but we can't use the words African Union or Economic, Social, and Cultural Council. Okay. So in order to comply with the cease and desist, we branded the campaign as the African Diaspora 6th Region Provisional Elections. Once we did that, we were in compliance with the cease and desist. Unfortunately, a big controversy broke out because some unscrupulous people who misunderstood what was happening, or for their own selfish agendas, started scaring people and threatening people that if you get involved in the campaign, you could be blackballed by the African Union, you could be at risk of some kind of legal action. And so even some of the coordinators received phone calls that were threatening and scaring the people. I remember when the campaign was first launched, you would think that, for example, the Barbadian ambassador to CARICOM, who also serves on the Caribbean Pan-African Network, CPAN, right? You would think that they would support an effort that was mobilizing grassroots people and civil society. But it was Ambassador David Komishiong who was the first to discredit the campaign and went on a scandalous, campaign to slander me and the campaign. And he got others in the Caribbean region to do the same. And so there was this behind the scenes whisper campaign. It was very much like the Garvey Must Go campaign, right? So those of us who remember back in Garvey's time, W.E.B. Du Bois, Philip Randolph, and what some people call the black bourgeoisie, the boule, when Marcus Garvey was doing this great thing where he had 1,100 UNIA chapters and 6 to 11 million followers. This other group of Black people who were in a different class, right, tried to discredit Garvey with their Garvey Must Go campaign. So history repeated itself. There were a group of individuals that kind of started this Siphiwe Must Go. If you get involved in electing these 20 representatives, bad things are going to happen to you. Well, we went to Addis Ababa, and before the General Assembly, the ECOSOC had some pre-summit events that we attended as guests of ECOSOC. And when we got there, we were warmly received. We sat down, we met with the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council officers. We met the new presiding officer. We met the head of the secretariat. We met the legal officer. We met the head of programs. We met the desk officer. And in each case, we weren't shunned. They didn't act, with animosity towards us. We were embraced. And we started working together. So it kind of proves that all those people that tried to sabotage the campaign and sowed a chaos in disunity, at the moment we were achieving unity, that old saying, you know the tree by the fruit that it bears. So we went, we had meetings, we got an understanding, both sides, why they had sent the cease and desist, why they weren't able to support the elections at that time. Out of that, they agreed, you know what, we sensitized them to things that they were doing that were creating a misperception of their intentions, and that was, instead of winning the African diaspora, you were actually losing them. After we had this great kumbaya sit down meeting, everything was good. The next day we started planning together. And out of that came an agreement to host the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council of the African Union, is going to host a town hall meeting using our campaign language, town hall meeting, right, on March the 15th, at 1500 GMT time, that's open to the entire 6th region. So we accomplished our mission. We wanted to get guidance from AU ECOSOC, and now they're going to meet with all of us all at once. And so everybody's invited. There were people saying, oh, Siphiwe, you're creating division and you're creating disunity. Actually, if you look at the end result is everybody's invited to sit down and hear directly from the African Union Economic, Social, and Cultural Council. So this was the big controversy going into the meeting, right? That somehow I, in the campaign to elect our representatives, they kept using the word illegal and fraudulent. The AU said nothing of the kind. They didn't say it was illegal. They didn't say it was fraudulent whatsoever. They simply said that since they didn't have a legal framework in place, they had to stay out of it. So we got all of that resolved. And so I'm happy to report that one of the big accomplishments was, again, we have this town hall meeting coming up on March 15th. And the other major accomplishment coming out of it was that during the Continental Strategy session on reparations, which we were invited to, that was again hosted by ECOSOC and some civil society organizations, I was put in the group that was dealing with legal and collaborative partnerships. And so that group decided to make this May roundtable, which comes out of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights Resolution 616, which was a result of my negotiations in October with the chairperson of the Working Group on Indigenous and Minorities Peoples in Africa. This Resolution 616, right, calls for this roundtable in May where diaspora representatives can meet with the Commission on Human and People's Rights and AU ECOSOC and present our reparations claims. So at the Continental Strategy session for reparations that was held in Addis Ababa as part of this AU summit, it was agreed that the civil society organizations, and that included groups like the Pan-African Lawyers Union, it included the African Judges and Jurists Forum, it included many key stakeholders, particularly in the legal civil society, all had agreed that the May Roundtable should be a main focal point of the first half of this year for justice for people of Africans and people of African descent through reparations. So that agreement from African civil society to support AU ECOSOC to co-host this was another major accomplishment. So at this point, now all we have to do is come to that March 15th meeting, get everybody there. Let's all decide together that following that meeting, we will continue the campaign to elect the 20 representatives in those regions that failed to elect representatives. We can have all the different groups be part of the leadership team that supervises the elections, and we all fulfill the assignment and show up at the round table with our 20 representatives. So that was that's what happened in Addis Ababa.
It was a lot. And I've seen some of the behind the scenes work. I've been on a Zoom call. I've seen your recordings on your YouTube page, Siphiwe Baleka. So I applaud you for being the diplomat that you are, right? So, thank you for breaking down, the obstacles. I won't go too much into that because there seems to be a lot that can be salvaged from that. But with that said, going to the March 16th town hall. 15th. Sorry about that. The March 15th town hall. Was that one of the objectives of going to Addis Ababa at this point? And then secondly, does this kind of affirm you as someone credible to work in the space for the 6th region?
Yes, because we have to go, let's remember, right? The second time that I led an effort for these AU 6th region elections was for the 3rd General Assembly, and that was back in 2020. And we had reached out to AU ECOSOC with very detailed questions about the process, different civil societies organizations that were already involved in AU ECOSOC. And we didn't get any response from them. Okay. Then in August of 2024, I happened to serve on the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, NCOBRA. They have an International Affairs Commission. I serve on that commission. We had formally invited several AU representatives in the diaspora divisions and diaspora organizations, CEDO. We had invited several of AU officials to come to the NCOBRA International Affairs Commission quarterly Zoom meeting to discuss its plans for this year's theme of the year. The national co-chair of NCOBRA, even hand-delivered the invitation letters at the AU office in Washington, D.C. And we got no response. As I had already mentioned, when we launched the campaign, we contacted AU ECOSOC, and instead of getting a favorable response, we got that cease and desist. And the day we got that cease and desist, we had asked for an emergency meeting with them, which they did not grant. So we had repeatedly, AU ECOSOC, to get guidance, to get information, to sit down with them as partners. And so I would say that, yes, the fact that we came out of these meetings in Addis Ababa with an agreement to do that, and not just with a small group of people, an open town hall meeting for the entire 6th region, is definitely, right, the fulfillment of the mission, and sort of restores my good name my good intentions, all of those things that a few misguided people tried to sabotage and destroy. But everybody can see now, you know, who was in the right and who wasn't. Everybody can see now that, okay, this was the correct thing to do, because everything that we did for the past 4 years and even the past 19 years wasn't getting a response. So what we did provoked a response. And now it's a good partnership.
Is there anyone, I know I give you a lot of credit for it, is anyone on your team or people that you've worked with that you'd like to give a shout out here, that helped you through this as well?
Yeah, there were the coordinators, those that stayed till the end, especially. You know, this is the fruit of a lot of work that began with Dr. David Horn, myself, Dr. Beryl Beekman. And there have been various groups and individuals all along the way that have been pushing for this. But it was some of the regional coordinators and some of the elected representatives. And then those that, you know, we made a fundraising appeal so that I and the elected representative from the USA region, Cecile Johnson, could go to these meetings, attend them and negotiate. And so all the people that contributed money, right, they know who they are. We're definitely thanking them. I'm not going to go list all the names, because then if I miss one is right. But there were a lot of people that contributed to the campaign behind the scenes. I have thanked them. They know who they are. It wasn't a one man, you know, I was the focal point. I led the thing and I was the focal point, but it wasn't a one man show. We had, by the time we got to Addis Ababa, we had over 2,000 supporters in the network that were active. So it was on behalf of them. We showed up as real representatives, not just individuals who went on their own initiative, you know, claiming to represent the 6th region. We were the only people there that were actually delegated to go, and had a real constituency that sent us there. So I think that's important to note as well.
Definitely. And so it sounds like the first 6 months of the year are going to be extremely busy for you. I'd love you to regularly report out on this, because I think we do need an outlet, and let this serve as somewhat of a press opportunity to kind of let the world know what you are doing here, because it's a monumental task and it's a big work. And I think that the audience at TransAtlantic would deeply benefit from having this type of awareness. So we hope that we'll be able to continue to have these updates for March 15 and then the May roundtable. And then how does this tie in with the 4th session of the International Decade on People of African Descent? I probably should have saved this for last to transition. That's more, but it's but we'll go in sequence. All right. So after March, the March town hall, then April you have the 4th session in New York. For any links there or anything that you'll be able to.
It's related. So yes. So we have this town hall in March, and then in April is the 4th session of the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. Now, in that arena,
I lost you at the people. Go ahead.
Yeah. So again, we have the town hall March 15th with AU ECOSOC. Then after that, in April, mid-April, we have the 4th session of the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. That is a different arena, but still in the international context. And it's an arena that we still engage and contend for power. Now, from the very beginning of the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent, its mandate says that the Permanent Forum can request the preparation and dissemination of information from any of the UN organs and ecosystem. Now, the International Court of Justice is part of the UN organs. So our interpretation of the mandate means that the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent can request an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on any legal questions that we, people of African descent, put to it. So at the first session of the Permanent Forum, I invoked this aspect of their mandate and submitted a request for an advisory opinion on the status of Afro-descendant people under the Geneva Convention and our right to conduct plebiscites for self-determination. The request studied the request that was made on behalf of the Palestinians, to which the African Union was a party to. We studied their questions. We copied two of the questions exactly, but put in Afro-descendants instead of Palestinians. And then we added 3 specific questions of our own. And we submitted these to the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. And that was the beginning of a campaign to have our case brought before the World Court, at least discussing the fundamental legal questions. Something that Malcolm tried to do in 1964. Something that Queen Mother Audley Moore followed up with to the Organization of African Unity in 1975. All of this was following the We Charge Genocide petition from William Patterson and Paul Robeson in 1951. But the difference is the We Charge Genocide petition was sent to the UN Human Rights Commission or Council. That's not a court. And genocide, and that campaign was dealing with human rights policy. We are now dealing with binding international law, the Geneva Convention. And we're not going to a commission, we want to go to a court. So the Permanent Forum, the president of the Permanent Forum at that time was Epsy Campbell Barr from Costa Rica. And we put a lot of pressure on her to sign the request and submit it. She said she would do it. She said she would support it. She sent me an official letter stating as much, but she never actually signed and submitted it before the end of her tenure as president. There is now a new president of the Permanent Forum, June Schumer. She comes out of St. Lucia. She's part of the St. Lucia Reparations Commission. The request for the advisory opinion was sent to her, and her response was, well, we need to do some kind of joint analysis. We need to really spend more time looking at the fundamental legal questions and ramifications. So we've been soliciting inputs from judges and jurists on the legal question. And what we'd like to do is, one, have everybody fill out the initial plebiscite survey that has 41 questions that is directly related to bringing this case before the International Court of Justice. We need 20 more judges and jurists to study the questions and write their opinions on the questions. And then we want to present this at the 4th session of the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent to say, look, you said at the 3rd session, we need more study, more joint analysis. Here is the joint analysis from judges and jurists, and here are the plebiscite survey results. And we submit that to PFAT and say, sign the request and send it to the International Court of Justice. Because at that point, now what excuse do you have? You said you support it, okay, but you said you wanted more joint analysis. So while I was in Addis Ababa, I brought this up to the Pan-African Lawyers Union, to the African Judges and Jurists Forum. And I said, look, with your help, we can have enough African and African diaspora legal analysis from lawyers, judges, and jurists to present to the fourth session of the Permanent Forum. So all of these things are related, and there is a strategy involved in here. And what we really want now is for all these people in the reparations movement, all these different leaders from different Afro-descendant groups to follow my instructions, right? Get on board the campaigns, not debate what we're doing at this point, just follow the instructions. And if we do that, we are going to make significant advances in several international arenas this year.
So I just want to do a quick recap for the transatlantic audience. You're looking at the circuit board under the engine of what will ultimately result in reparations, human rights, self-determination. This is where we are addressing historical wrongs. You actually have a unique vantage point from a brother like Siphiwe and others listening to this broadcast, to be able to empower yourself with the information so you can actually figure out how you can make a contribution to it. So just to recap kind of the goal, the sixth region, particularly with the efforts over the last 6 months for you, Siphiwe, was mostly to get the sixth region in place so we can be part of the conversation as it comes in terms of the year of reparations from an AU perspective.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
So all of that, in addition to now, we just got through talking about the fourth session of the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent, which is a different arena, which is the United Nations, right? And this is the fourth session, and they did approve a second decade, correct? At some point, is that confirmed?
That's my understanding.
So at some point we'll do some kind of back, because this really needed to be on an education campaign, because I grasp somewhat because I've been around, but I just put myself in the shoe of someone that's observing. And they're like, well, what's in it for me? Reparations, right? This is kind of the painstaking work that has to take place. And, we need your help. We need you to be empowered. We need you to be informed, because this is going to take a collective effort. We don't even know if it's just going to be one lifetime, right? We don't want this to die with the people that are working on it now. This has to be a lifestyle for all of us. So I just wanted to put that out there and let the people know this is what's at stake at this point, and it behooves you to become educated in the process. Even as myself, I need to be more educated and be more involved in the process, and we have to find the bandwidth to be able to do so, because all of us are impacted, and most of us want reparations.
I like to use the analogy that Malcolm X used. He once said, if you stab a person in the back with a knife that's 9 inches and you only pull it out 3 inches and the knife is still in their back, you haven't helped them. We are at the moment where we are preparing to have the knife fully removed and have medicine applied to the wound, and to have regular checkups to make sure that that wound heals properly. All of this, what we're talking about, all of this work is to get us to that moment where we actually pull the knife all the way out. And that's going to involve the whole world, because there is internal reparations, what we as African people on the continent and outside the continent, what we have to do for ourselves in terms of that healing process. And then there are those who are non-Africans, what they have to do. And it involves the whole world. Okay? So those that were guilty of let's put it this way, those who held the monopoly Occidental war contracts for the Dum Diversis War have obligations under the Geneva Convention to pay reparations for war damage. Okay? So all of the nations, first it was the Portuguese. After that, it was Genoese merchants, so Italians. After that, it was the Spanish. After that, it was the Dutch. After that, it was the French. After that was the British. The British 13 colonies got into the war and into the trafficking of our ancestors, so they were in it too. And then when those 13 British colonies became the United States, the official United States Constitution sanctioned the war when it said that it could continue up to, what was it, 1807, 1809 in the Constitution? So all of those that were official monopoly war contract holders, right, with the Vatican that initiated the war, have obligations under the Geneva Convention. Then everybody on the planet has an obligation to support the justice cause. Just like everybody on the planet paid attention to the genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza, and even if you weren't guilty of it, right, you had an obligation to support justice. So the whole world is involved in this now. And when that wound is healed, then part of all of humanity in the world is healed. But we are at that moment where everybody is getting ready for that moment, because that moment when you pull the knife all the way out is a painful moment. It's a critical moment where immediately things have to happen and follow-up has to happen. All of this work at the AU and at the UN and Permanent Forum and in other international arenas is all leading up to this moment.
So, and nothing will be the same anywhere in the world for anybody. So this is important. I know this doesn't have the lights and the glamour and the sexy production that everyone is used to, but it's often said the revolution will not be televised, but this is the closest it will be to being televised. Like, this is a big deal, family. Absolutely. This is not insignificant. This is, you can see a lot of comments. We're kind of talking, and this is the work in action. So I really wanted to drive that home during this conversation. So with that said, we talked about the fourth session, and then the main roundtable that will be held where?
It's supposed to be held in conjunction with the 83rd Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which is headquartered in Banjul, Gambia. So I'm suspecting that it will be in Gambia, but I don't know for sure. It hasn't been announced.
And what are the objectives, at least from an Afro-Descendant sixth region perspective?
So our objective at that roundtable, the first objective is to, we are already in the process of preparing reports from all the repatriated communities in every AU member state. So for example, I'm a repatriate living in Guinea-Bissau. You have a number of sixth region repatriates living in Tanzania. You have a number of sixth region repatriates living in Ethiopia, living in Ghana, now in Benin, in other places. These are the vanguard people in that repair process. Because remember, right, there was an invasion. Some of us were taken from our ancestral homelands. So complete repair is us returning to them. And we face a number of issues. We face a number of issues regarding citizenship. We face a number of issues regarding our integration into the continent. And so those who have been in the vanguard in these countries are preparing reports to present at the roundtable saying the first priority for reparations is lineage restoration. Everybody that wants to should have free access to African ancestry DNA testing to find out who they come from in Africa. And it is what the Geneva Convention calls the detaining nations. It is their responsibility to provide it under the UN charter, the UN policies that say all scientific and technological progress has to be utilized for the benefit of humanity, all of humanity. Well, if our experience was one of, if not the greatest crime against humanity, that means all DNA testing, its first priority should be used to repairing the damage done to us, not necessarily used in crime scenes or paternity suits. That test should be made available to everyone in the diaspora so that they can find out who they come from. That has to be front and center of every reparations conversation. And we're going to highlight that at the roundtable. Following that is, there is an unqualified right of return for everyone who is a descendant of the original prisoners of war that were trafficked. And we are seeing today, my home country, Guinea-Bissau, will grant you citizenship if you take the DNA test and you show that you are a person of Guinean origin. Other countries are doing that. Burkina Faso is now using African ancestry and not only accepting people of Burkinabe origin, but anyone who was trafficked, who is descendant from the people that were trafficked. So we are going to present these reports to say those that have already repatriated are suffering the following problems that we need remedied. And we need that citizenship process codified and simplified. And so these reports are going to be presented as the framework for what is needed and how to go about getting them. And then finally, the third major priority agenda is the plebiscite, right? Allowing everybody, whether you're in the United States, whether you're in Barbados, whether you're in Suriname, whether you're in Guyana, whether you're in Colombia, Brazil, whether you're in Canada, right? You have the right to decide, do you want to return to your ancestral homeland? And if so, you get the reparations needed to do that. If you want to stay where you are, but exercise your right to self-determination and establish your own sovereign government on territory where you already live, you should get reparations, right, that will help you to do that. If you want to emigrate somewhere other than your ancestral homeland, because maybe you have family or some other reason, right? You should get the reparations needed for you to do that. And then finally, if you want to integrate into the society where you live, and you don't want to be on the bottom like new African people are in the United States, you need the resources so that you can properly integrate and be at the same economic level as the rest of the society. So the process that allows everybody to choose which one of those destinies they want is the plebiscite. And so we want in center of every reparations discussion this year, we're going to bring to the roundtable.
It's powerful. And I wanted to, you mentioned diasporans that are already on the continent, and I don't know if I'm allowed to disclose it, but last time we sent messages, you were in Shashamane, right? And
yes,
in Ethiopia, which is there's a decent expat community from the Afro-Descendant diaspora. I've been there myself, and one of the things that was heartbreaking, it was kind of a case study for me in my mind of what an Afro-descendant community would look like that had decided to exodus. At some point in Dimona, Israel would be another one. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned struggles of each of those groups and individually based on their ability to even secure residence. right? So, I don't know how much I should say, or you let me know if I should take it out of this recording here on the Zoom, but I remember in Shashamane, they were just a couple people that just were kind of there, right? And without any paperwork, and it was like, I can't ever leave. So if I leave, I can't come back. So that's some of the issues that we're facing as we leave. And it's important that we all kind of have these forums where we're addressing our collective concerns together so they can be addressed at one time. What's your take on it?
And you're absolutely right. Shashamane was the land grant that was given by Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie, right, after the Italians invaded Ethiopia and attempted to colonize them. They lost that struggle, and afterwards, the Ethiopian emperor had to rebuild after 5 years of war and occupation. And Ethiopia had received a lot of support from the African diaspora. And so, as an acknowledgement of our support of Ethiopia during her time of trouble, the emperor granted 500 hectares of land in Shashamane as a land grant to be the first of many land grants for the Black people of the West, as the Ethiopian World Federation, to come and occupy the land. And let's read in Addis Ababa at these AU ECOSOC pre-summits. One of my great colleagues, Jasmine Rowe, representing the Shashamane community, said from the floor how disgraceful it was that after 80 years, the people in Shashamane still don't have citizenship. And so the problems that they have, you mentioned some of them. A lot of people don't know you have to pay fees for every month that you've overstayed your visa. And you can't leave unless you pay these fees. And if you don't have residence and you don't pay these fees, you can't work legally. So you're stuck. You're trapped. Now, many people have to leave Ethiopia and go to neighboring countries and then re-enter the country and get new visas that are only good for 90 days. And there are all kinds of problems that make the situation unstable and untenable, both for the repatriates and for the government. And so these reports, like the report coming from Ethiopia, are going to detail what all of these problems are and what are our recommendations, what we have determined we need in order to fix the situation. Now, if you go to Ethiopia like we did, Cecile and I went and visited the Shashamane land grant. I had returned after 21 years, so it had gone full circle. I was able to see all the development, but also hear all of the continuing and escalating problems, etc. Okay. One of the things that I learned is that, the repeated attempts to resolve these problems, when brought domestically within the Ethiopian jurisdiction, are not being remedied. And so we now realize, and this is what Jasmine and I came to understand, and many of the repatriates in Ethiopia are understanding, that Ethiopia has to put together a report saying this is the problem and combine it with the reports from the other repatriated communities and take it to a jurisdiction higher than the domestic Ethiopian jurisdiction in order to get some kind of remedy. So after 14 years, after I wrote back in 2003 it wasn't for citizenship, but it was the next closest thing that we could get. Ethiopia back then had come out with a new law called foreign nationality, Ethiopians of foreign origin. So it recognized Ethiopians living abroad and that they could qualify for permanent residency, citizenship, and those kinds of things. So back in 2003, I had drafted recommendations to the Ministry of Immigration for Ethiopia, that the repatriates, particularly the ones coming from the Caribbean region, should be classified as Ethiopian origin, based on the statement of the emperor himself, who, when he visited Jamaica, said, "Dem wan de mooch, we are blood brothers." Well, if we're blood brothers, that means we are of Ethiopian origin. And if the emperor himself recognized this, so should the law. It took 14 years, but in 2017, it was granted. So many of the community was able to get permanent residence, but not everyone. And there's still many problems. So we want to use the roundtable in this theme of the year as an opportunity to not only get their situation rectified, but all repatriates who are already on the continent, who have been pioneers in this effort to reconnect those abroad with those at home. Those pioneers, we should settle their cases, get them situated, and then make it easy for everyone else to come, right? That should be a priority.
Absolutely. I remember hearing stories of people that have been there for 50 years.
Yes.
You know, I went there in 2015, so many of them might not even still be around.
You know what was funny? I got challenged on this. People, especially there's people particularly coming out of Barbados, right? We don't want to go back to Africa. We want to trade with Africa, but we want to stay here. And you have people in the United States. Well, we built America. We want to stay here. And I keep reminding them of two things. One, the sixth region concept doesn't mean you have to go back to Africa. It means that Africa now extends wherever there are African people around the globe. So that you are to conceive of Barbados as a member of the AU, of the African Union. We are to conceive of Black communities in Harlem, in Watts, in Detroit, in Columbia, right? You are to conceive of yourself as being part of the African Union jurisdiction. Now, the other thing that I reminded them is this, which is how you expect Africa to go out into the world and say, you European invaders and colonizers, you owe us reparations. And then they turn around and say, but you aren't even giving reparations yourself to your own people. Your own people are begging you to return for citizenship, and you're making it hard for them. So the point I made in Addis Ababa was the reason why this is priority is because Africa will be hypocrites if they expect European nations to pay reparations when they haven't paid the internal reparations first. Africa, in order for you to be on high moral ground and a strong foundation, you only achieve that after you have done your part, which is provide the citizenship and the reintegration programs. When you have done that, you can say, we've done our part, right? Some of us were complicit in this. We owe our lost children these things. We have done our part and is setting an example for the rest of the world to do their part. That's when they're going to be on moral high ground.
And it sound like many people in America who have migrated there trying to sell their status shaky. A lot of these people have contributed greatly to the societies for many years without documentation.
Yes.
In such a body. So I'm with you on that 100%. So I know we're running out of time, and
okay.
I know you're busy. I want to wrap this up real quick. Thank you again for being so detailed in that. So I don't know if you have time to go into just the response. What I'll do is I'll splice it into the video.
Let's save that for the next one. If you have time, within the next week, we can do one specifically devoted to that conversation and engagement with Cecil Guzmore.
Yeah, not a problem. I agree. This was a lot, and we still really haven't, unpacked a lot. So more to come, family. Truly appreciate Brother Siphiwe. Anything you'd like to plug right now, Brother Siphiwe, as well as calls to action for the next few months here.
Again, post the link for the initial plebiscite survey. If you haven't taken it, please take the time to answer these 41 strategic questions that are going to position us for our reparations demands at the permanent forum and at the round table, right? And then just come to the town hall meeting on March the 15th. We're just waiting on EcoSoc to finish the flyers. We already have the registration link. We're just waiting on the flyers. We just want to encourage everyone to come in the spirit of Ubuntu, even if you were, clashing with this group here or that group there. It doesn't matter. Let's all use this moment to demonstrate a real Ubuntu moment where, in spite of our differences, we can hash it out amongst ourselves and come together to achieve a common objective. And so I'm going to end with this. While Cecile and I were in Addis Ababa, we attended a Black History Month meeting that was conducted by the Ethiopian World Federation. And it was led by a colleague that I met 20 years ago when I first came to Ethiopia, named Ras Tagasa. And he was telling the story of how the formation of the Organization of African Unity. And you had these 33 heads of state in the room trying to forge a unity. And they were arguing about everything. They had all these issues that they had differences about. You had the Monrovia group, the Casablanca group, and trying to get a kind of unity, a uniform unity, was impossible. And Ras Tagasa told this story. He said, His Majesty the Emperor, he said, look, the path to unity, when you have 100 issues and we can't agree on all of them, the path to unity is to find just one issue out of 100 that we can agree on. And we start there. The one issue that we can all agree on in this context right now is we all believe that the diaspora, the sixth region, should have representation in AU ECOSOC. I think we all agree on that. So we can use that to rally all the different groups who are contending to start this Ubuntu unity thing during this year of reparations. So come to the town hall meeting on March 15th in that spirit.
We'd love to post it on TransAtlantic if it's available, or at least a recording of it, again, to shed light on it. So, but truly, it's going to be on a Zoom, correct?
Yeah, it's going to be a Zoom, March 15th, 1500 GMT, which is 3 p.m. West Africa time. So that's 2, 1, 12, 11, 10, 9 o'clock, 9 a.m. It's a Saturday, so it'll be 9 a.m. Central Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time on March 15th. We have the link. We're just waiting for the flyers, and they should be out soon, 2 weeks ahead of the event. And this is a watershed moment for us.
Yes, sir. And we look forward to promoting that on TransAtlantic. Thank you so much, Brother Siphiwe. Truly appreciate it. Keep doing the outstanding work. Support this, brother. Valenta.org. Any other websites before we sign off here, brother?
Yeah, we also have NADCSC.org. That's New African Diplomatic Civil Service Corps. NADCSC.org. For those people who are serious and want to get involved as new African diplomats and join me and the teams that are doing these negotiations, you need to get trained. So this is the certifying course. You can go there to get trained. And then there's also AfricanDiasporaAssembly.com. That is the website for the elections campaign. It has the results and the information, and we'll see what happens to that website after the March 15th meeting. And then again, like you said, there's balanta.org. If you go to the news and history section on that website, you're going to find a ton of information.